Good morning. My name is Garrett Sheehan. We'll get started with our webinar in just a moment. Thank you for joining us today. And we'll give everyone just another minute to get here into the webinar, and then we'll get started. Again, good morning. My name is Garrett Sheehan. I'm President and CEO of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. We're so excited that you joined us for our webinar today, Hispanic Progress Through Business and Political Power, presented by our Diversity and Inclusion Council. We want to thank, before we get started, all of our sponsors, and again to UI, Southern Connecticut Gas, Connecticut Natural Gas, for supporting so much of our pandemic programming that we've done over the course of the last several months. We also work with several other chambers in the region to stream this broadcast, as well as the other webinars that we've put on, and all of our investors in the chamber. And it's through their support that we, as a nonprofit organization, have been able to continue to operate and provide resources to businesses as we continue through the pandemic. So thank you to all of them. We truly do appreciate it, and it's how we're able to do this type of programming. Our Diversity and Inclusion Council has been doing a great job providing resources and also putting on webinars like this today. So I want to thank the council members, Jean and Cecil, specifically our co-chairs, for helping put this together. Jesse Phillips, who is our staff liaison. And if you're interested in joining the council, you can reach out to Jesse. Just contact us on our website, or you can reach Jesse at jphillips@gnhcc.com. So we do have a great panel coming up in just a moment. I should mention our other groups as well. Our panelists today: George Perez, Commissioner of the Department of Banking; the Honorable Representative Juan Candelaria from the State Assembly; Jorge Jimenez, Tatiana Paredes, Ramon Peralta, Juan Salas Romer, and Norma Rodriguez. So I'm going to introduce each of our panelists as we start to talk about these issues around diversity, inclusion, opportunity, and access, and have them speak for just a couple of minutes about their experience and how in the business community we can start to create more of these opportunities and have a much more diverse business culture. Commissioner Perez, let me start with you, and thank you so much for joining us. You're such a key part of New Haven, and obviously leading our state now in banking. And I know, especially as we've gone through this pandemic, having diversity and the opportunities that these different stimulus programs that have been out there has been key across all businesses.
Just sending to you, it's not working. My screen is like, it's not working.
George, can you hear me?
Yes, I could hear you fine, but since somebody else was speaking, I was waiting to finish, to let them finish. Well, good morning, everybody, and good morning to the rest of the panel. And I would like to say thank you for this opportunity to be part of the panel. And I look forward to having a good discussion and answering questions. As we all know, the Latino, some people call it Latino, some people call it Hispanic, some people call it this new word, Latins, community is diverse and it's up and coming, and it's playing a major role in the economy of the USA and opening up a lot of small businesses. And with that comes a lot of challenges that we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Great. Thank you, George. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Representative Juan Candelaria, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. I know you have a leadership role in the State Assembly, and you've been keeping track of not only through the pandemic, how the opportunities that have been out there, but how we can have more of a role and more open diversity for all businesses here in the Greater New Haven region.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be a panelist with all of you, all these distinguished individuals that I've gotten to know in one function or another, either through my regular private life or through my political life. So I'm glad to be here with all of you. Yes, I think that this pandemic, as we've seen, has thrown a monkey wrench on the economy. As you all know, this has a significant impact, not only on the political world, but also on all the businesses and the impact that has had on many of the business for long periods of times. We're still, as a state, trying to look at ways to recover, but it is a challenge where we'll need the feedback from everyone to ensure that we move our state forward. So thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you. Norma Rodriguez, La Voz Hispana. Norma, we've talked before, and your newspaper, and then also some of the things that you've been able to do through radio and podcasts have been very influential in the business community. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having us.
And what do you
Yep.
are some of the
La
key
Voz
issues that you
Hispana.
think, that you need to be discussed?
Well, first of all, I'm really thankful to the Chamber for having decided to have this event during Hispanic Heritage Month, which is, very important. I think this is the first time for the Chamber that's doing this. And I hope that every single year the Chamber can continue these kinds of programmings to inform a lot of the individuals, a lot of our business owners about the Latino community, because many of them, what they know of is what they see on TV or they hear on radio. Even though as the time passes, we're getting more and more diversified, and the Latino community in itself has been extremely diversified. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and we'll keep talking.
No, thank you, Norma. And you're right. This is the first time for the Chamber to do this event and several of the other diversity and inclusion webinars we put on in the last several months. And it should have been done before, but glad that we're doing even more now to have a much more inclusive economy. So thank you. Let me turn to Tatiana Paredes. And Tatiana is with Stanley Black & Decker and involved in one of these key areas that we're talking about, procurement, getting more suppliers from a diverse background. So Tatiana, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me this morning. It's a great way to kick off Hispanic Heritage Month, and I actually oversee our Hispanic Latino network at Stanley as well, so this is a great month for me. I do try to encourage the Hispanic population to understand what it is to be a minority-owned business, so I am very thankful for this opportunity to share more.
Great, thanks for joining us. I'll turn now to Juan Salas-Romer, and Juan, you're known for real estate, but especially now for Known, your co-working space that I know you've put a lot into and very active in the New Haven community.
Thank you, Garrett, and thanks for the Chamber. I think this is a great opportunity for Latinos, Hispanics, to have this door open with the Chamber. Thanks to Garrett's leadership and as well as his team. Tamika, I see she's there, as well as Jesse and the rest of the group. Yes, as you know, as you mentioned about Known and the co-working space, part of the idea that inspired the Known co-working space is exactly raising that equity and bringing the Hispanic community as well as others in the New Haven area to have an ecosystem, a village for entrepreneurship. I'm very thankful to be here and to promote what we're doing. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And Ramon Peralta. Ramon, this is the second time back on a webinar with us. You have your own marketing and branding firm. What are some of the challenges that you faced in starting a business, and what are the things that have been successful for you?
Well, thank you for kicking off Hispanic Heritage Month this way, and for having me back, first of all. I think the immigrant spirit is really important to discuss because it's that work ethic that a lot of minority businesses have. But having witnessed my dad run his own business and not be fully literate financially and suffering from it is what caused me to really focus on setting up our business in the proper way. And so we work with a lot of small businesses and helping them launch. And I think a lot of them, especially in the Latino, Black and Brown communities, could not really benefit from the PPP program, for example, just because they simply weren't structured properly. We were, fortunately, because we had everyone on payroll and W-2s, but a lot of small businesses don't do that. And although we're helping them on the branding side, I think more outreach with educating folks on how to properly set up their businesses would benefit them in the long run.
Great, thanks, Ramon. and Jorge Jimenez. Jorge, with Citizens Bank, I know that there was a lot of challenges when PPP first rolled out in getting people involved into the program. Many of those were worked out in the second round, but maybe speak to us a little bit about the challenges that just talks to in working in the minority-owned business community. Some of the things Ramon was just speaking to.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you again for having me. Pretty excited. This is a great way to have Latinos kind of really see what key issues they're facing. I think that you know, coming from the banking side, and as I see working in the community through different several hats that I wear, I see that the biggest issue was for Latinos looking at the PPP and saying, hey, how do I apply? And having a registered legal business, you know, paying state, federal taxes, their legal status was the reason for them to not be able to apply for PPP or any, you know, community fundings because, again, of their legal status. So I think that was a key challenge, and it's still a key challenge, and it's great to see this panel, this great panel here, to help raise this kind of awareness, to help small Latino business owners of how we could overcome that.
Great, thank you. Hey, Norma, let me go back to you. And this is a theme that you mentioned, and I've heard it through now with several of our speakers. What would you say are some of the key differences or things that people should be aware of about Latino businesses, maybe in just some ways that they operate differently or ways to interact? I myself learned when PPP came out that so many of our minority-owned businesses were not connected to the major banks that we have out there, but used instead different financial institutions, and that became a change that occurred in the second round of PPP. But what are some of the things that stand out to you? And then we'll open it up to the rest of our panelists.
I think, Garrett, what we need to understand first is about the Latino community. When we talk about the Latino community, who is it that we are talking about? See, many years here in New Haven, when you talked about the Latino community, you were basically speaking about the Puerto Ricans. And the Cubans and the Mexicans. Now that is not so anymore. When you talk about the Latino community, you're talking about 21 different countries that are now considered the Latino community. And for a lot of Americans, they think we're all the same. You know, we come with different culture, the same language, even though, you know, you say, well, do you understand each other? Yes, because when people speak English, okay, when you come from London, from England, okay, you come to America, you speak English, but you speak English with an accent. And yeah, you have your idioms, but still we understand each other when it comes to language. The thing is about culture, we'll all be learning. Now, what happened is the same thing to the Puerto Rican businesses, okay? They were the first ones to open up here in New Haven. Now, a lot of them, they became retirement age. Many of them went to Florida, some to Puerto Rico, some just retired. And so when we're talking about the new businesses, we're talking about businesses not done as usual as the Americans consider business, because they've had to create their own culture of business. Because first of all, many of them might be undocumented. So what does that mean? They can't get a loan. And even for the Puerto Ricans, for many of us, banks were not friendly. You know, and I'm sure if you do an analysis about banks and the interest that they charge the Latino community, it's a lot higher than they do for someone with the same credit that is not Latino or African American, if they even get a loan at all. Because that's one of the main issues with the PPP, is that you had to have an association or a relationship with the bank. And many of our people did not have it. Now, what's happening with these businesses? You remember in East Haven, all the issues that they had with the police on Main Street, that it went even to the Supreme Court. If it were not for the Latino businesses, Main Street would be in East Haven, Campbell Avenue, Grand Avenue, a lot of those businesses would be nothing but closed up storefronts. thanks for the Latino businesses that they've had to learn to do business on their own way, you know, strategically doing it financially speaking. You know, money's, you know, they don't have much money to start their business. And I think the gentleman that Ramon Peralta was talking about marketing, he himself found out that that's the main problem with our businesses, that we don't have monies to really, we only count on whatever is there. You know, we can't get loans. A lot of the businesses can't. So they also have a way of borrowing from each other, which a lot of other communities do the same thing. They have to borrow from each other because the institutions, okay, they require all these documentations that many of them do not have their house in order.
And
Thank
Garrett,
you.
I just want to add, that's a great point, because that borrowing from each other, that's not going to show up on your Dun and Bradstreet report. So when a Stanley or a large company wants to work with you, they're not going to see, you know, the problem I see and the challenges with even first generation businesses like myself is that we may present small to a large company that may have an opportunity for us, and not having capital to scale or to merge with or acquire other companies so that we can work for these larger companies is an ongoing challenge.
Gary,
George, go ahead.
sorry, this is George. I mean, I want to address a couple points that particular Norma made. Banks are not allowed to charge different rates for different people based on their ethnicity. So I just want to correct that. But one of the things that I notice is that in particular the Latino community, but this is true for other communities, is the type of loan that they tend to get or tend to apply for, which are basically SBA 7As, which tend to be a little more expensive because they tend to be prime +3, versus the more traditional term and working capital loans that other businesses apply for and get, which tend to be a little cheaper. But there's also different requirements for each loan. So sometimes they go with the SBA because the requirements are less and it's easier to get because you don't have to provide as much information. And the PPPs, there was, what people need to understand is that the federal government overnight decided to create an unbelievable program and put out first $350 billion and then another $200 billion without creating the infrastructure or the training or the education, not only for the consumer, but for the bankers. And then they used a system that was not created for that purpose. And in the very first half hour, one bank alone took down the entire system because they put through 99,000 loans, which the system was only created to handle 1,000 loans, 10,000 loans per hour. So there was a lot of issues. And I'll give you a little story. I met with several people to try to address, more access to capital for everybody, right? But in particular, Hartford, New Haven, New London, Bridgeport, where I got most the complaints or inquiries about. So one of the person I spoke to was Julio Mendoza in Hartford, and from Sama, and I tell him, okay, what is the biggest issue you're finding to reach the Latino community? He says, George, I have over 1,200 Latino business people who are members of my organization. When I need to discuss something with them or to bring information to them, I have to get in my car or walk to the business, versus the non-traditional Latino, I could use an email. So something as simple as an email, a majority of them, according to him, this is based on the conversation I had with him, he found very difficult to be able to provide him information because they didn't have the tools that we're now used to using, right? And now it's considered to be efficient. So one of the things we did was Western Bank, which if I'm not supposed to use their name, I apologize, but this is positive. Liberty Bank and non-bank credit union put extra officers in those areas to reach out to that community. Even though in many cases they don't have branches, that's not considered quote unquote their market. That was also done in New Haven with West Fargo, was done in London with other banks. So there were some efforts. At the beginning it was very difficult because at the beginning the bankers themselves didn't even know what to do, right? Because they were not trained. This announcement was made by elected officials with good intentions. A system was selected that nobody really knew how to, that was not designed or created for that purpose. And also the sophistication of the business matters, right? If you go to a business person saying, Okay, my payroll is $5,000 a week. And then you say, okay, show me canceled checks. And you can only provide $2,500 worth of evidence. Well, guess what number the banks are going to use, right? Well, I pay people under the table, or I pay them cash. Well, they got to understand what the rules are. And if you don't follow the rules, it's not, the banks, if you don't follow the rules, then they got to deal with someone like me, right?
Representative Candelaria, let me turn to you. So, as we're speaking, I think a lot that comes out is there's just a lot of barriers out there. And, I know next legislative session, there's going to be a lot about social justice, but, how do we start to break down some of these barriers? Are there things that we can be a statewide approach, obviously local approaches as well? And you're muted there.
Juan, we cannot hear you.
There we go. I think one of the biggest barriers that we have is the language barrier. It's cultural. We're very protective as a community, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges, right? As our commissioner spoke about, I've had a relationship with Sama as well, and I heard the same stories, the challenges that they were facing in helping a lot of these businesses, right? Because they do not have the ability to systematically create a ledger or other things to track their business activity. I think they're entrepreneurs, they're very resilient, but when it came to technology to upgrade their businesses, and that's where they had a little bit of issues. And one of the things that we've been doing and I've noticed this, and I think we need to refocus more, is investing resources in helping businesses become sufficient. And what I mean by that is providing them with the proper training so that they can do their own bookkeeping, or at least engage them in the knowledge that they can contract with a bookkeeper to look after their books. I think that's critical. And the other part about this is that many of them are accustomed to deal with cash, right? They normally do not borrow. So unfortunately, they are unbankable, not because they have bad credit, because they don't have the credit to get a loan. So for those reasons, I think that that's a state we need to create, either through bonding, additional resources so that they can build capital, borrow to build capital on, and improve their businesses. I think that's critical. And that's something that we need to look at when we go back into the legislature, is how do we help businesses get the resources that they need and the technical assistance that they need. Sama and George spoke about it. I've been working with Sama for the last 18 years since I've been at the legislature, and they provide that type of service. But unfortunately, we have one organization and the need is a lot larger than that. So I think that we need to expand upon that and work with DECD, who has a great minority program, but needs to be expanded and be inclusive of everyone.
Jorge, we've been talking so much about banking, want to include you in the conversation. I'm sure some of these issues you've experienced firsthand.
Yeah, and again, just to add to Juan just now, I think one of the biggest things, again, that we hear back was that people are scared. People are scared about their legal status. People are scared about not knowing their rights. So I think when Juan is saying that we need to educate them and help them know how to, if it's training or any of that stuff, I think the first thing is to let them know what their rights are so that they're not scared to reach out and look for help. Because a lot of the times they're again, it's just simply being scared to ask for help from, if it's government help or anything like that, because of their legal status.
And does it, the issue of legal status and enforcement, does that extend beyond someone who's even, is in this country illegally? I mean, does that have a pervasive effect on entire communities about a distrust of government and programs that are available?
Well, I mean, it's a huge thing here, especially, I think locally here on the New Haven level, and, thanks again to everybody here, what we've created here in New Haven to help minority-owned and small business owners, again, it was, another part of the disparity of not having the right legal status for them to be able to apply. And, I think, as you know, through the news, we saw these great local community help that were here to help. But again, we couldn't reach the right market of Latinos or small business or Black-owned business owners.
And I want to let everyone know too, you can put questions in the chat. We'll try to get to all of those as well. Tatiana, maybe talk to us a little bit about the experiences you see in getting all minority-owned businesses, but in particular Latin-owned businesses into the supply chain at Stanley Black & Decker. It doesn't have to just be Stanley Black & Decker. There's lots of other businesses, obviously, where getting into those procurement chains can make all the difference for a business.
I want to touch on a point Ramon made. Corporate is very aware that businesses are struggling, and we understand that the resources are limited. You know, education is key. I heard about, you know, people starting businesses not having the right organization. Structures are very important, but at least for Stanley Black & Decker and the organizations I've worked with, we've always looked at mentoring programs. Who are those vendors that are close enough to be able to join our pipeline that need a little extra support? So right now we're actually about to introduce our mentoring program where we're going to work specifically with these suppliers. So we are trying to address these issues where companies are almost there. Right. But we cannot work with everyone. So I'm going to be honest, we cannot work with everyone. But I do think that certain organizations, you know, when you register to start your own business, you register with the state. Are we doing enough at that starting point to say, hey, you know, make sure you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G if you really want to be successful? But that's probably another topic for another day. But corporate America is very aware of these issues, and we are trying to do what we can. If you look, a lot of our corporations, they all have mentoring programs.
When you say businesses that are almost there, what are some of those things that they need the most help with that you hope to achieve through the mentoring program? So
the topics we're probably going to look to cover are probably pricing, which is always a big thing right now, especially now. Everyone wants to get the best price. How do we have our team work with someone to look to see where they can provide better pricing for us, and how do we work with them? We understand some people do need a little help with the finances. I have our finance team that has agreed to kind of help guide a few people. So it's going to be an application process, and it's going to be based on the needs that we see. So it could be marketing. I know, sorry, Ramon, I'm not trying to take over your world. No, Don't worry.
No.
I can send them your way though. That may be easier for me.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah, so we're actually looking at these things. You know, did you just submit a really poorly written application or RFQ? Did you not answer the right questions? Did you, we're asking you about widgets and you're answering about, I don't know, fasteners. Those kind of things that we want to address, that you are a good candidate, but you just missed it by this little.
Yeah, I think that's key. And thank you for what you're doing at Stanley. I can say that I benefited from some scholarships that were afforded to me to attend Tuck. And they have a number of MBE executive programs that helped me learn how to scale and learn how to grow, because without that education, culturally, and I can speak, as you can see, Latino community runs a gamut, right? From immigrants worrying about being illegal to someone like me, born here in New York City, first generation business owner. But there's still some legacy, and on the topic of legacy, we don't have our parents, like Jeff Bezos' parents, giving him $250,000 seed money. We don't have that. So capital is an issue, education is an issue. Whereas culturally, we're almost taught that we need to bootstrap ourselves all the time. So I had a hard time kind of getting over this hurdle that having a business line of credit was a good thing, and not that I was saddled in debt. I kind of held this badge of honor that I was bootstrapped, but then if I do get that big opportunity, and what you find out in business when you start dealing with larger companies is that they take longer and longer to pay you. So a small company might be able to pay me in 14 days net, but a larger company, a corporation, they might need 90 days net. And if I am living payroll to payroll and I don't have access to a business line of credit, I run the risk of not being able to pay my team. And so going to Tuck and learning about these things, I didn't necessarily go to business school. I went to school for creative and art and marketing. And so I needed these business classes to learn how to scale and grow. And I think education, more of these things that Tatiana is speaking about, more of these programs that talk and giving access to smaller companies to learn about these things is key, because without that information, we're just not going to be able to scale. And what good is it getting an opportunity if you can't handle that opportunity?
Or at least show that you can actually handle it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Gary,
I'm going to do a shameless plug because I used to work for the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council. And when you go GNEMSDC, but when you go through their certification process, these are some of the things that they'll look at to make sure that your org chart is correct and your finances are in order. So it's investing in your company in order for you to grow to the next level. I know it's time consuming to attend all these webinars like this one, but it's investing in yourself, and we should all be taking the time to do that if we want to be successful.
Great point. George?
before I was a banking commissioner, I was a banker, and I held many different positions, from being a mailboy to the most recent one, which was a commercial lender at the largest community bank in Connecticut. And what I can tell you is that what I see, there's basically three fundamental business needs that basically every business has, right? But in particular, the Latino business person is more highlighted, right? And a lot of it has been discussed. One of it is capital, right? Not only equity capital, but access to capital, meaning equity, meaning an investment, whether it's borrowing from your relatives, whether it's an investor that invests money in your business, and working capital, meaning access to a loan or other traditional type of lending. Access to the procurement process, right? And not only how to fill out the form and so forth, but also that entity or that group of people understanding that a lot of those small business can't wait 60 days, 90 days to get paid, like Ramon was saying. And not only reaching out to the business, but also how your business as a major institution is going to make it easier for that small business, in particular the Latinos, since that's what we're talking about, to do business with your entity. In fact, in New Haven, we, in the construction industry, we did try to address that through some of the major developers, where they came up with the line of credit, and they actually put up the money for the sheet rock and some of the supply, and then they got paid back from when a drawdown was made. And last but not least, which has been mentioned a lot, and again, I'm oversimplifying this process because we only have so much time, is the whole training education, right? And everybody thinks the solution to everything is training and education, right? Which is a big part of it, but it has to be geared to that particular sector of the community, right? Because they have some very unique needs, not only culturally, not only immigration. You know, this may come as a surprise to people, and please, I hope nobody shares this with the Trump administration, not that I'm trying to be political, but when we do examinations of banks and credit unions and so forth, we don't look to see if they do business with an immigrant or not, right? There's particular things we look for, right? Do they have a TIN or social security number? Now, if our elected officials, not the person, excluding the person, but in the federal level, pass a law that says you can only access PPP if you are an American citizen, well, they gotta follow that rule, because otherwise they'll get in trouble, right? And that's about the only time that we will look at that. And I can tell you, when like I said, I held many different positions in banking. One of them was a branch manager, and later on was a market manager, which means I oversaw many branches. And when we open an account, we didn't ask you if you're an immigrant or not. We didn't ask you if you're here, if you have documentation. We did ask you for ID, and that's why a city like New Haven came out with the city ID. We do ask you for a TIN number if you don't have a social security number. And the sophistication is so different. So that's why it's so important that education is part of it, like it's been mentioned, but gear for that particular community, because not only do we have cultural, religious, but there's very specific needs that that community has, like any other community when they first started.
Let me get Juan back into the conversation, and Juan, I think a lot of what we're talking about is entrepreneurship too, and I know that's something you're trying to develop at Known, is a diverse community and a focus on entrepreneurship. What have you seen in doing that, in kind of bringing together many different communities and people together? What are some of the needs that are out there?
Okay, thanks, Garrett. So what we've been doing, well, first of all, we started as a co-working space back in October, and in March we had to close. So we have a very short life so far. And what we did in March is we created 3 different virtual programs. One of the programs called the Connection Corner, the other one is called Digital Media Sync, and the other one is called People Talk. And we just set ourselves to explore, to start, interviewing people in the city of New Haven, understanding, what are their needs, how are they building their business and all that. And all we did is just, let's keep the momentum going. Let's bring in that community. And I want to address something, that is connected. So we talk about finance and why we have this, why we think the role of this co-working space is important. We talk about finance. We talk about education. I think the other element is connections. Is how do you connect people? And I think that one of the things that me coming 20 years ago from Venezuela, a country that saw their economic and civil liberties constrained, I came to the U.S. for looking for opportunities, and I was lucky to be able to be already connected because there was a family relationship in the U.S. But a lot of people don't have that. And one of the things that I'm thinking that we could do it as a co-working space that and also all these virtual programs is really start building bridges. Is really understanding that a lot of times in society what's happened is that people are so focused on silos, on different areas of that they don't talk to each other. And one of the things that we need to understand is, let's lower those barriers and let's bring people in so that they could connect to others. And then that's what a co-working environment gives you, is that ability to say, okay, yeah, I could meet other people and I could start working with, let's say, Ramon, and Ramon's going to figure out, oh, one is good at this thing. And then little by little, you start scaling up. So finance is super key. Education is super key, but the connections are important.
Let me ask this. I'll start with you, Norma, but I'll open this question to everyone on the panel. So a business that's listening today, they want to work with more Latino businesses, but they don't know where to start. How do we start bridging that gap and make those connections? So Norma, maybe I'll start with you.
I think branding, again, I refer to the gentleman that's in charge of marketing, but we have certain products, okay? La Voz Hispana, which is the state's largest Spanish language newspaper, which circulates in the 9 cities with the highest concentrations of Hispanics. So, and then radio stations, I think that it's important for the businesses to reach out to the Latino communication outlets. That way, because a lot of times when they see your business and these different, then they consider you to be Latino friendly. So it's very important that if you're going to do business with the Latino community, you reach out to them and you use the different media, the Latino medias that are available to them. Also, doing your product in both English and Spanish, that really helps making sure that your services that you render are also listed in Spanish. And then also all the different social medias that are available in the different, because still, you can't go by the way the mainstream goes. For instance, the Latino population here in New Haven, the median age is 26. So we are a very, very young community, and you have 3 or more generations living in a household. So, when you're talking about reaching the demographics and you're talking about reaching children, you're talking about reaching teenagers, you're talking about reaching parents, and you're talking about grandparents and great-grandparents. So many times in one household, especially here in New Haven, we have a lot of, the Latino community has a lot of more than 3 generations in their household. And also the thing that I find that's very interesting, you have a lot of people. I remember when I was going to school, it wasn't fashionable for you to speak Spanish. And the main languages that they wanted you to learn was French and then probably Italian. Nowadays, everybody wants to learn how to speak Spanish. And so what's happening is we're very similar. There really isn't that much of a difference between the new immigrants that came many, many years ago, the Italian, the Irish, and the Polish, with the immigrant population, the Latino immigrant population that's coming now. For instance, years ago, when you wanted a Mason, you wouldn't find a better Mason than the Italians. Okay. What was their issue? That they really couldn't speak English, but they were masters. And Yale University has a perfect, when you go for a guided tour and you look at the mantles, those folks competed with each other as to who had the best workmanship. That is now true with the Latino community. The Ecuadorian community is considered the Masons, so the Italians of this era. So, you know, everybody eventually mainstreams, but until, and I know we're in America and they always say, speak English, you're in America. I agree 100%. But you know what? You don't learn English from night to day. So until you take and you transcend and you learn the language, you need to deal with their language if you want them to buy your product.
Great. Thanks, Norma.
I,
Now,
I
let me
hope that was
open
quick
that
enough.
up to others on our panel too, about how do we create those connection points and get more involvement, and I know it was said before, it's the networking as well. Who else wants to jump in on that?
Gary, I think that's a great one. How do we connect more? You know, being in the corporate sector, you know, and I've been in the banking section for about 15, 16 years. I've worked very closely in Fairhaven area most of my career, closely with SAMA, and doing trainings and whatnot. But one thing that I think there will always lack, and still to this day, is Latino networking events that are kind of designed like the chamber does, like the connect. That there's a huge you know, we're missing that community. So I think if our next thing, if we progress from this, would be hosting a networking event where we're highlighting these Latino-owned businesses, especially in the Fairhaven area, since, you know, we talk about Grand Avenue, there are 95% of them are Latino-owned. So how do we get them to connect to the other side of the river, to the downtown New Haven area, with all these great small businesses like Ramon, like you know, other panelists down here, to connect everybody, that we're really kind of expanding on that.
Yeah, if I may add, I think networking is critical and is key, right? It's a key component for our Latino business to communicate with others. But I think looking at the Chamber of Commerce needs to play a bigger role within the Latino community. That has not happened in the past. Like an arm, creating an arm, the Latino Chamber of Commerce. Let's create that arm. We haven't had that conversation. And I think New Haven, or Greater New Haven, is lagging behind other cities. I know that Bridgeport has been doing with the Fairfield Chamber of Commerce and others. But we in Greater New Haven have not focused. Correct me anyone if I'm wrong, but I'm not aware of it. And I have not seen it in a long time. But I think the chamber, the Greater New Haven Chamber, can play a critical role in this. How do you, with the resources that you have connection to all the businesses in the city, how can you open those doors so that our Latino communities can take advantage of that? Is it through engaging in networking with those businesses? First, I think we need to begin engaging within ourselves, right? So that we can get to know each other and what are the products that we are offering out there, from branding to manufacturing, because we have them in all different areas, right? I think as communities, we're resilient, and I think we venture in a lot of opportunities, and we've all created different types of businesses, but we're not talking to each other, and that needs to happen right away, because there might be something that one at NHR might need from another business, for example, branding. Who better than Ramon that has been doing that for years, but maybe they've never connected until today. So how do we do that moving forward? But I think for that to happen, it needs to be initiated somewhere. And maybe the chamber is where it gives birth to it. So I think that will be a critical piece for us moving forward and engaging in those types of conversations.
I appreciate that, Juan.
And
it
Juan,
has been lacking, and we need to take that charge. So thank you.
and I just want to add to Juan, I know I've worked with Juan for many, many years with the Progreso Latino Fund, which is, again, a chapter from the foundation in New Haven. And, we're not a chamber, but we are a chapter that we try to raise the socioeconomic issues of Latinos in greater New Haven. And I know Juan has helped us do many, many great wonders. And I think that might be just a start right there itself, to see how we could, again, keep expanding that network that we already have a small database of New Haven, knowing how many small businesses are in New Haven, just keep expanding that. So again, I invite, maybe the next one would be a networking event of some type where we could use already the resources that we have kind of already started.
But you're on, George. Let's get it done.
I know, everyone get their Outlook calendars out, and we'll.
No, if I may, I think the Spanish American Merchants Association, SAMA, knows about every single Latino business that's out there. I think a partnership between the Chamber of Commerce and SAMA to put this together, I think would really be a home run.
That's a great idea. And, we've obviously been having a lot of conversations about how we can work more closely with Black-owned businesses. And one piece of that has been, it's the chamber needs to be a part of it, but it also doesn't need to kind of dominate and try to, all of a sudden just show up on the scene and take all the air out of the room. So I think, Norma, a great point of it's partnering with other organizations, leveraging what each organization brings to the table.
I totally agree with that. I think SAMA is critical. We'll play a critical role in all of this. But I think it needs to happen, right? And what better than today that we're engaging in this type of conversation? I think we have experts from all areas who are panelists today that can add something to the table in ensuring that we kick this off. So I definitely look forward for that, because it's critical, right? We talked about networking, we talked about financing, we talked about the hurdles that Latino businesses need to jump through to get working capital, access to working capital, as the commissioner spoke about. And we've seen that more clearly today with this pandemic than ever before. Some of our businesses have closed their doors because why? Because they didn't have the resource or didn't have the education to apply for a PPE loan, right? So engaging, knowing what we know today, I think, although unfortunately, but it'll give us the strength to come together as a community and help these businesses for the future, right? Ensuring that they have the resources they need to succeed in the future. And I think that's critical. So that's my 2 cents.
Ramon, I know you're trying to talk to me there.
Yeah, I wanted to add that it's an opportunity for the chamber to be advocate and connector. Because it's going to create this great content for you when two minority businesses work together. They can hire each other, and beyond that, I mean, that's the networking aspect. But beyond that, there's this opportunity to form strategic partnerships where maybe two smaller businesses can pitch a larger client or go after a larger opportunity together if they have services that complement each other. And when that happens, as the chamber, it doesn't mean you're being heavy-handed, but you can highlight that opportunity or that success story so that when people wonder, well, what does the chamber do? You can point to that and say, well, here are two chamber members that hired each other, or here are two chamber members that, won a larger project together, and now they're strategic partners. Those are the kind of things that people will want to read about or see on social media to say, okay, now I understand what the chamber is all about.
Excellent. Yeah, no, chamber is definitely a platform that we can use to create these types of connections. We're coming up towards the end of the hour, and I know we can talk about this for a lot. So I want to give each of our panelists opportunity for one closing thought. And Jorge, I'll start with you. And I think so much of what we talked about is opportunity and access today, and really highlighting the economic impact that the Latino community has, and how we can do more to make those connections. Jorge, thanks again for joining us this morning. What would you like to close out on?
There's two Jorges. Which one are you addressing?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jorge Jimenez, you got
I've been
it.
addressing me as commissioner, so that's why I didn't speak.
Did you say Jorge Jimenez?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, I think again, I think this was a phenomenal start to Hispanic Heritage Month. I think this was a phenomenal forum, panelists, everybody that joined. This is a great start, but let not this be the last one. We need to figure out how to come together, estar unidos, to keep progressing together. And I think there's a lot of organizations, I think there's a lot of support, especially during this pandemic, to realize who's really hurting, right? Especially a lot of small businesses are hurting, a lot of Latino small businesses are hurting, but to realize that we need to come together. And how do we come connected together? Avoid all the silos, right? Get everybody together. Like Norma said, a partnership, but let's do a partnership between all of us, not just a single partnership. Let's not leave somebody else out of the table. Let's put everybody around the table. So I think that's my only message of closing. Let's figure out how to all of us work together and how to get more people to join, other Latino leaders in the area, and say, hey, let's get all of us together to work towards the same goal that all of us are working towards the goal. The Chamber's working towards the goal. PLF is working towards the goal. SAMA, La Voz, Ramon, all that same goal. We all have the same goal in mind. So let's work together.
Great, thank you so much. Juan?
For me,
Two ones.
Boy, I'm messing this up. Juan Salas Romer.
Two George and two Juans.
Two.
Two Jorges and two ones.
We need two aces.
Juan Salas, why don't you finish it?
Is it me? Okay. Well, I think that we've hit on finance, we hit on and access to capital, we hit on education, we hit on connections, we hit on having the chamber have a more relevant role with the Latino community and building bridges and all that. So all these topics are super relevant. I think that we need to define success. I think that one of the definition of success for the Latin community in New Haven is something that it should be explored. I think what Norma said about the Italian community and how they were had this particular skill, for construction and all that. I think we need to identify that. I think we need to identify what the Latin community is good at, and really promote it there, out there, and and build those bridges.
Thanks, Juan. Appreciate it. Ramon?
I like to say that a rising tide lifts all boats. I think that if we keep in mind our most vulnerable in our business community and reach out to them with all of these solutions that we've discussed, it's going to benefit all Americans. It's going to benefit the entire economy. It's going to benefit our entire community. So let's continue to, each of us individually as our businesses continue to reach out to those most vulnerable and continue to help each other and work together.
Thanks, Ramon. Tatiana?
I'll just say that it is Hispanic Heritage Month. So our culture is what makes us stand out and what makes us innovative. Embrace it, showcase it, bring that passion that we have to the businesses that we're running. That's all I'll ask people to keep in mind.
Thank you so much. Norma?
Well, I'd like to close with a very quick testimony. Okay. I needed $39,000 in December. And I got a call from Webster Bank, supposedly my personal banker. I said, you know what? Don't even waste my time. Because I need, it's very interesting. I go to a car dealership to buy a car. They give me a $40,000 car and don't ask me to show them nothing. Okay? They don't ask me for anything, and yet they give me a car that's $40,000. I go to a bank, they want to see everything. Banks know everything about you already. So you know what? He called me and he said, Norma, I got $40,000 for you. This is what I need. And I took him what I need, and I got a $40,000 personal loan that I need at a time in which I really, really needed it. So you know what? I really don't understand why this can't be done to a lot of the people out there. Everyone knows what we have. They go into, don't only go by the credit, go about your everything, all your responsibilities through the years that you have had. So I'm very grateful. I just think that, you know, sometimes we need to be a little bit more lenient with the Latino community because of all the issues that they have confronting them, especially when we're talking about their status.
Thank you, Norma, for joining us. Representative Juan Candelaria.
First of all, I want to thank everyone in the panel. Thank you so much. I've been enlightened by most of the information that you provided. I think, how do we engage our political leaders and our business owners in conversation? I think that's where we need to go. How can we do more at the state level to ensure that we're inclusive of all businesses, including our own Latino minority businesses? I think that's where the conversation is. What is it that we can do to facilitate, to ensure that you have access to capital? We understand that you have barriers. What are those barriers? How can we work together to ensure that we develop policy that beats those barriers so that you have the access that you need to that capital so that you can grow your businesses? And I'm looking at it from a political perspective. And I think that's the conversation that needs to happen. How can we help all of you succeed? How can we help all the other businesses succeed? But only for that to happen, we need to engage in that conversation. And I think we did a little bit of that today, right? We talked about how important networking is. We talked about how important access to capital is. But we also talked about the barriers that we face as community and how important education will be to the Latino community so that we know what barriers we will face in the future and we can overcome them. So for me, it's engaging in that conversation, and I look forward to the creation, right, of a Latino chamber or something of that nature where it's inclusive of everyone, talking about SAMA, talking about all of our bankers, talking about the commissioner, so that we all at the table having the bigger discussion. So thank you again.
Thanks, Juan, appreciate it. And Commissioner George Perez to close us out.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to all the panelists and to you, Gary, for putting this together. And hopefully it would not be it was the first time, but hopefully not the last time. As has been discussed, I mean, the challenges out there, but challenges to me are opportunities, right? So I translate this to be an opportunity to be able to address those challenges and be able to come up with a solution. I agree that we need to, well, again, I'm oversimplifying it, but there are three basic challenges that any small business faces, right? And in particular, new people in the community, and in particular, the Latino community. And it's been discussed, so I'm not gonna go into great detail, but power, influence is one, networking, branding is another, and be able to help the rest of the world understand that we're no different, like Norma say, that the other immigrant groups that come to this country, whether it was Italian, the Masons, or so forth. I can tell you, I truly believe that we need an organization to take the lead on this, but we don't have the time to create a new one. So if we have an organization out there like SAMA, I think we should work with them to try to help them get there. As a commissioner, you know, I have a specific role to play, but I can influence in many different ways. And I'll commit that that if that effort is taken, I will play a role on it, and I will commit that I will bring you the bankers and the credit unions to the table. And to be honest with you, I don't think it would be difficult. As I found out in the pandemic, whether they were state charter or federal, they were very willing and cooperative in trying to help people. So I think they would like to be as helpful as they can too, but they don't know, right? Now, there's some exceptions to that, right? Some of them are around this table. And Juan is totally right. Networking is critical. I mean, I don't want to give up any secrets, but I mean, he was a customer of mine in the past, right? And Norma talks about her $40,000 loan. So were you, right? And she talks about her $40,000 loan. Well, when Juan came to me for some loans, he didn't have to provide some of the same information because I already had it, right? I knew the business, right? I knew the properties that he was buying. I knew his prior life as a developer. You know, to say that Norma would have it a little easier, and not that she has it easy, I mean, that's understandable. She's the owner of the major newspaper of the state of Connecticut, the #1 newspaper in the Latino community. Of course, the understanding of that is much different than in a business that has started 5 months ago and nobody's heard of. So that goes back to that network, and it's critical. And it's critical that we support each other. To be honest with you, when I was a banker, and I was a banker for 28 years, I had very little referrals from my own community. Very little. And the likelihood of a small business, Latino in particular, or any business, but a small business in the inner city getting approved if they came to me was much higher than anywhere else. And in fact, I was able to, my employers' understanding, be able to get some deals done that traditionally are very difficult for banks to get done. And in particular, my last employer even created a special fund to be able to help businesses in the inner cities that were more challenging, because they didn't like to use the SBA, because even though in some ways it's easier, in some ways it's more costly. And as a commissioner, it's amazing how people come to me out of anger sometimes and say, well, this has happened, that's happened. But where have you been all your life? Why wait until after the horses leave the barn to fix the door, you know? Why not be more proactive early on and try to address those issues? Again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. We do want to recognize that it's Hispanic Heritage Month, and we recognize that this is just the first step, and we have a lot to do as a chamber, and to not let this conversation just end today. I will let everyone know we have our annual real estate and construction forecast coming up next week on Thursday. Thank you again to everyone. We appreciate you being part of the conversation, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Bye-bye, honey.
Bye.
Bye.
Okie dokie.